Hello there beautiful, welcome back to my channel. How are you doing today? My name is Joesephyr and welcome to another Should You Pull video for Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia. Now I know what you're thinking, Ace and Bart's event hasn't even happened yet. What are you doing making another Should You Pull video, Joe? But Square's decided to release Aranea's Lost Chapter featuring Prompto's LD 2 days after Ace and Bart's and DET5 comes out. So I wanted to get the information up and ready so that everyone had it available, even though they may not know where their resources stand after Ace and Bart. So if you'd like to learn more about Prompto, what he gets out of this banner, and what little Aranea gets out of it, as well as the event itself, then of course as always, stay tuned and keep on watching. As always, before we get started, don't forget to check out all of my social media links down below. I'm actually streaming lots of FF14 as usual, and obviously every event for Dissidia as it becomes available. I've actually just picked up my Ruby weapon mount, and I'm very, very pleased about that. So definitely come and find me over on Twitch if you want to come and see me live. Over on Patreon, I do always shout out one of my patrons every time I release a video, and today that person is going to be Matichiru, who has Noctis on their title card, and I make all of the title cards that you see at the end of my credits myself, and I make them for each individual person that decides to support the channel. So a massive thank you goes out to Matichiru, as well as everybody else that joins in with Patreon, because without that I wouldn't be able to make the videos and streams as often as I do. So huge thank you goes out to those of you that support the channel. Don't forget, of course, to support all of the other content creators out there for Dissidia Opera Omnia, and all of the resources and websites, etc. that come around for this game, because everyone works really hard on these things, and it's really important that you go and support those guys. So as always, we'll start by taking a look at the banner itself and what comes along on there. So taking a look on the banner, we have Prompto, his full EXLD, everything that comes along with it, as well as Aranea, who's returning on her own Lost Chapter, as well as another opportunity to grab hold of Ace BT if you haven't had it already, and then Rem with just her EX. Now, Aranea, despite it being her Lost Chapter, much like Guy's Lost Chapter, doesn't really get a lot from this particular event. Now, Aranea isn't quite as sort of egregiously bad as Guy is at the time of his release, but she doesn't really get an awful lot of updates. She's still useful in certain aspects, in that she has Vital Crusher, and she gets like a lot of re-breaks and delays in her kit, so she can help in a lot of ways. I've actually used Aranea a lot since her LD came out, a lot more than I ever expected to, but it's sad to see that she doesn't get a lot of updates here. What I would have liked to have seen, and honestly a small adjustment I think would have made a big difference to her, is if her LD put the Vital Crusher debuff on enemies, because then her LD call would have it as well, because the main reason you bring her along for her call ability is to have Vital Crusher through her High Wind attack, and she doesn't give that with her LD, so you don't get two lots of it, which is a crying shame. But she still has uses, like she's still, you know, very usable in her own Lost Chapter. Perfectly fine character, but chances are, if you haven't used her already, you don't really need to chase after her now. And then obviously Prompto is on the banner, so we're going to talk a lot about Prompto, because Prompto's LD does change quite a lot for him, and he's not a character that a lot of people have typically used up until this point. So Prompto is very much a kitchen sink unit. He does a lot of different things, none of which he hugely excels at, certainly not at this up until this point, but his LD does give him some extra benefits as well, which are all very nice. If you haven't used him before, Star Shell is his lock and evade attack. So if you've used Edge before, then you get a similar kind of thing here, where you lock all enemies onto Prompto, and then Prompto gives himself evasion up for a few turns, and then you get a party battery and an HP attack out of it. Quite simple. So the only thing you have to worry about with this is that the evasion buff doesn't last that long, and this is something, again, people will have used with Edge, but you want to make sure that your evasion doesn't run out before the lock does, at least not unless you're using shields, etc. So you want to be careful of that. Otherwise, it's a great tool to have access to. Piercer actually isn't that great in attack on its own. It's a 5-hit Brave HP attack that inflicts defense down and gives him his offensive buff, so life of the party, gives him the bits and pieces that he needs to have access to, like his max Brave and attack ups, his Brave HP pluses. But the thing that comes off of this is his Break Mark. So Break Mark is a unique kind of icon. It's not even a debuff, it's an icon that appears on the enemies whenever Prompto takes a turn immediately after the enemy has been broken or attacked while being broken. So typically Prompto wants to go either after a trap that breaks, or typically just another ally that is breaking or attacking a broken target. Now this would just give him access to different HP and bravery attacks in Overkill and Crackshot, which you wouldn't typically use that much nowadays, but it also has a very important aspect to his LD. Then you have his EX, which is Trigger Happy, and Trigger Happy gives him a framed buff called King's Buddy, which increases the party's attack and speed up a little bit, so he becomes a little bit of an aura bot from this point. His speed, and he does, with all of his like ingots and etc., does 10 AoE bravery single target HP, randomly targeting with those HP attacks 10 times. So you get a decent amount of damage out of it. His EX will get a lot better come his C90, which will come along with Noctis and his BT+, and it actually elevates him a great deal. But we'll come back to that. Talking about his LD now. So his LD is, again, another party battery, which does a multiple HP dumping attack, so 3 HP dumps. It also gives him one of his skill uses back for each of them, so you get a Star Shell and a Piercer usage up back. And you also get a brand new buff called Past Overcome. So this now adds to his supporting roles. So he adds more party attack up, more party brave damage percentage by 20%. He also gives HP regen to the party, so he's now got healing in his kit as well. And he also, when attacking an enemy with a break mark, this is very important, increases the stacks of Past Overcome by 3, up to a maximum of 4. Now this buff is very important to Prompto because it allows him to do a follow-up attack, provided that his stacks are at 4 up until he runs back down to 1 again. So this means that he'll always have the support buffs out of it, but every time he uses one of these link attacks that come off after his LD stacks are at 4, it will then tick back down to 1 again. So you need to make sure that when you're using Prompto, you are preferably always attacking with a break mark on there so that he can then restore his Past Overcome stacks by 3, get himself back up to the maximum so that he can continue to use his link attack. So what link attack is while he has those buffs, after any ally's turn, he triggers link attack, which is a instantly breaking attack that does 2 hit brave HP twice and has splash damage on there, also gives party battery. Also, it inflicts a rather hefty attack down debuff that originally came from his overkill attack, and this can occur 3 times before Prompto's next turn. He restores his stacks by attacking something with a break mark, and then you just continue to go off. So at this point, he's now got attack, max bravery, physical attack buffs, brave damage increases, HP regens. He's now a debuffer for attack and defense, and that attack debuff is actually quite large. He's got evade and lock thanks to his Star Shell. He's now got instant break. He's got batteries, follow-up attacks. As long as you're keeping on top of those break marks, he gets a lot out of it. Now, I talked earlier about his changing HP and bravery plus attacks, and these will come and be a lot more relevant again after Prompto gets his C90. So these are Overkill and Crackshot. So right now, Overkill plus is an attack that's just a bravery attack that gives the attack down, which we don't really need to use anymore thanks to the fact that we get that attack down from his LD. However, after his C90, it does an instant break, it does 4 hit brave HP twice, still does that attack down, and has a high turn rate and doesn't add to your turn count. So he then becomes turn efficient as well. Crackshot, as it is right now, is a ignoring defense, which is always a key thing, a brave HP attack, but it doesn't hit very hard, and it doesn't really get a lot out of it. Crackshot plus plus, however, is a 6-hit brave HP attack that hits twice, that ignores defense, and does splash damage, like 50% splash damage to targets, which is fine. Like, it's really, really good, but we obviously don't have access to these yet. But it's the reason I bring them up is because they are something to look forward to when it comes to Prompto in the future. Prompto is a kitchen sink unit. He has a little bit of everything, and all the stuff that he has, he's actually very good at. Having instant break on follow-ups is a really nice thing, just for anyone who is looking for an ideal third character that they don't really know like what to put into that slot. Prompto is perfect for that, and because he has so many different aspects to him, much like Zidane, he's a character that you can use in a very, very wide variety of places. Does he excel in a lot of the places that he's in? He's not a tank. He has tank qualities, but he's not a tank. His buffs are good, but they're not like over the top really powerful. His healing obviously is just HP regen. He has no burst healing or anything. But I think the combination of those things, along with the instant break, the defense ignore, certainly later on, battery, follow-up attacks, all these different things, makes up to being a pretty damn good unit. Now, I spoke about Aranea and her call abilities earlier, but Prompto's call abilities are actually kind of interesting in that they are very varied in what they do. So, much like the unit himself, Starshell is a tanking-based sort of skill where you get the party battery and then lock and evade up as well, but the lock only lasts for 1 turn, whereas the evade up lasts for 3, so the same thing is still going to apply here, where you need to be careful not to let the evade run out before you get the lock to go off. And it also adds party physical attack up by 30% as well, whereas the LD call gives you party attack up and then HP regen and then bravery damage up. So it does a bit of healing, a bit of damage up, a bit of tanking, some evasion. It's got a little bit of everything. Now again, I don't think that you'd necessarily bring this all the time. Like, it certainly wouldn't overwrite your staple kind of call abilities, but it's quite nice to have that like range of things like that he has access to. And then when it comes to his gear as well as high armor, he has Unity Keystone, which I always appreciate. And then on first glance, I looked at Prompto's high armor plus and was like, oh, why aren't you party wide? Why don't you have party wide stats? And I still kind of feel that way. However, having 30% increased bravery damage cap on him is actually quite nice when you look at what his kit does. So he has a lot of HP dumps in his kit, whether it's his EX that has like 10 HP dumps in it, the follow-up attacks that don't have very many sort of brave attacks in between each HP attack. Typically, you will find that if a character has a lot of HP dumps and not a huge amount of bravery hits, you want the bravery HP, a lot of the bravery damage limit to go up. Whereas if it's the other way around and they hit a lot of bravery hits but don't typically have a lot of HP dumps, then the HP damage limit is what you're after. So I'm a little sad that it's not party-wide, but I think that 30% bravery damage increase or bravery damage cap increase on Prompto is quite valuable. He's not a unit you're going to use a lot initially, I don't think, but he's definitely a nice character to have in your back pocket. Okay, so let's now take a look at the event that comes along with Prompto and Aranea, which is Aranea's Lost Chapter. So we've now fought these guys quite a few times in the past with Aranea. Like, you know, we know the story where they put up shields to protect each other. They can't be broken unless they take critical hits. And then after they've taken critical hits, their bravery is up for grabs. But this fight is slightly different because it's being a Lufenia, plus there are new mechanics in place. So for starters, there is the Lufenia Orb itself, which asks for critical damage and range damage. And you get +1 to the orb each time you inflict one of these. Now, obviously, a character like Aranea, who does range damage and does guaranteed criticals thanks to Vital Crusher, will obviously be your best shout here when it comes to tackling the Lufenia Orb. However, that's not to say that she's the only character. Prompto obviously does very well here. Trey actually does very well here as well, due to not only this, but the instant break mechanics that he has as well, which you can use to get rid of the shielding that they do instead, because obviously with Prompto being a main part of this mission, then instant break comes in very, very handy. Now, the only thing you really have to worry about with this is after the enemies act, they like change the levels of their shield. So it goes from white over to yellow, over to red, and then back to nothing again. And for each level that it goes up, they reduce your brave gains and brave damage by a sort of exponential amount depending on what color their shield is. If it's red, then you may want to try and protect yourself and wait until they've acted again, so that you can then do all of your damage while the shields aren't really present. The other thing to bear in mind as well is that if you're going for a 0-turn run, then you need to at least a 0 boss turn run. You can't really get away with 0 boss turns because they need to take at least 1 turn. Otherwise, after you hit the 80% HP threshold, they put up this ridiculous shield that reduces all of the damage that they take by 200% and makes it so that they just basically can't take damage. So you definitely don't want to go for a completely 0-turn run. But as long as you let them have a turn, then you can go off all the livelong day using your Sid Mao, and then if you've got a new Bart's toy to play with, then you can get used to using that team a fair amount because it's very strong for a lot of events. So if you've got Sid Reigns, Aphmau and Bartz, fill your boots, just make sure they get themselves a turn before you decide to put them in the ground. If you want to do an off-turn strategy, then you can take something like Ace and Trey, or Prompto and Trey, or Prompto and Ace, or something along those lines where you're getting lots and lots of off-turn damage from those characters. And because Trey's EX debuff makes it so that you can instant break the enemies pretty much whenever you want, you don't really have to worry about a lot of their mechanics at all. And he's ranged, and obviously as long as you're breaking the enemies, you're going to get critical damage anyway, so win-win. This actually, provided you have the characters and the knowledge of the event before you go in, then it shouldn't be too much of an issue for you. Just make sure you're taking at least one ranged character so that you're dealing with the orb. You can also use Setzer here if you really want to really make sure you're dealing damage when you're dealing damage, because this is still a Lufenia Plus mission, so therefore your damage is going to be heavily hampered. And I did also forget to mention as well that they do, after 80% and 50%, put up a large bravery gain, and then they reduce the damage that they take as well. So this is where you're realistically wanting to bring along your instant breaks or anything like that. Or in the case of your Sid Mao, gravity damage also works, or you just hit them really, really hard. I've seen ace clears where they just hit really hard. Porum reduces their bravery quite quickly as well. There's lots of options when it comes to this mission, provided that you're bringing along all of the bits and pieces that you need for the mechanics, and all of the mechanics typically require the same thing. So instant break, or a way of reducing damage very quickly, or dealing critical damage to remove the shielding in the first place, and then range damage, and then you're pretty much good to go. So now, of course, we come to the big question of the video: should you be pulling for Aranea's banner featuring Prompto? Now, Aranea doesn't really get anything new here, and her role as being the primary damage dealer in your party isn't really the same as it used to be. Certainly not when she was a global first character, because her lack of HP dumps in her attacks make it so that there's a lot less scope for growth with her attacks, so therefore there are a lot of characters who have access to things like delay, re-break, etc. that kind of just accelerate way past her when it comes to the actual damage numbers. Vital Crusher, however, is still pretty great, and the fact that her LD makes it so that she is breaking enemies with every attack that she does, including free turns after her, while she has her EX buff up, she's not bad. She's actually still pretty, she's got qualities about her that are still pretty solid. And honestly, one thing that these two characters both share is that if Vayne BT Plus is something that's maybe tickling your fancy, then you might want to reconsider looking at these two, even just under a new light, particularly Aranea, because Vayne's BT plus follow-up comes after breaking the enemies. So if Aranea is breaking all the time, then maybe there's an argument to be had there. Prompto, on the other hand, is your kitchen sink unit. He has a lot going for him. He covers a lot of roles. He does tanking. It's limited, but he does do tanking. Healing now. He's got HP regen, batteries with a lot of his stuff. His damage is actually pretty solid. When you take his link attacks into account, his own turn damage isn't fantastic, but when you take the amount of damage he deals by being in the party, it's not bad. And having access to instant break on follow-up attacks is actually a really powerful thing to have access to. He does debuffs for attack and defense. There's all sorts of things that he does, and he's only looking to get better. So honestly, I would gauge whether you wanted to pull for Prompto, if you're wanting to pull for Prompto, on whether you'd rather go now and see if you can get Ace BT along the way, or later, when he gets his C90, when Noctis comes back around and gets his BT+. So I would gauge, if you're after Prompto, whether you really need him now, or whether you want to have him ready for when C90 comes out, so you don't have to pull on that banner at all, particularly if you already have Noctis, or if you've already got Ace, then maybe you could consider picking him up later. He's not mandatory by any means, no character is, realistically, but he's definitely a great third character to just plop into your team when you're not sure how you want to finish it, because he does cover a lot of things all at once. but he doesn't excel at any one aspect of those things. We have instant break units, we have healers, we have battery units, we have like other tank, we have evade tanks like Galoof, etc. If you're after somebody with a more dedicated kit, Prompto's probably not going to be for you. I really like the kitchen sink units like him and Zidane. I find them really interesting. But the other thing that you might want to bear in mind is that that break mark is very important to his kit if you want to stay on top of his LD stacks. So before you go in on using him or pulling for him or anything like that, make sure you understand that mechanic before you do. So now, of course, it's time for Would You Pull, the section of the video where you, the viewer, get your chance to let your voice be heard and let everyone know whether you would or wouldn't pull on any banners and why that might be the case. Now with this one, for me personally, I'm happy with tickets on this banner. Not a huge number of them either. I already have Aranea, and Prompto, I like him. I actually really like him, but I definitely don't think he's a character that people absolutely have to have. New players, however, might want to give him a second look, just because he just slots into so many parties just nicely. I wouldn't say he's busted in any of them, but he's nice in a lot of parties. And if you've never really used Prompto before, this is definitely one of the times where he definitely shines for a while and then his C90 comes out and he does so again. So personally, I'd like to at least try and pick him up now on the back of the fact that it means that when his C90 comes out, I have him and Noctis to be excited about. So going into the numbers for the patron votes, so thank you very much for all of your votes and comments again. 12% of people said yes, they were pulling with gems here. 19% of people said they were using 100 or more tickets. 19% said less than 100 tickets, and 50% of people said no. So I think that after Sid, Afmal, probably Ace, stuff like that, people are looking for places to recover their resources, and this is a good one. And then Quistis will be the same, provided that you can get yourself around her particular Lufenia Plus mission, because neither Prompto, nor Aranea, nor Quistis, nor Palom, if those banners stay as they are characters that people will not replace with new shiny toys as they come about, most likely. Are they usable in stuff? Absolutely. Are they exciting when someone new is coming along? That's up to you. Going into some of the comments though, Spickle says I voted no here. Don't get me wrong, I'd hardly be unhappy with the free pull if the free pull goes well, but I like to take every opportunity to save where I can. If memory serves me right, characters like Aranea and maybe even Barrett could meet all requirements. Either way, I should be fine without. Which is fine, and I didn't actually consider Barrett for the orb requirement because he's ranged and fixes your party's crit rate, so he's definitely a character that you could bring out for this particular Lufenia Plus mission if you wanted a reason to use Barrett. Gabe Turner says, nope, Sid Reigns was not kind to me and I need to save resources. I already have Aranea's kit. Although Prompto was a lovable character, I have to pass. He does come back in the future with a C90, so I'll likely pull then. So I think with this banner, like, it is just very resource dependent at this point. Like, if you have a large number of resources and you happen to get Prompto, he's really cool, and I do think he's really nice to have access to. But, like I said, a lot of people probably won't pull here because they'll either pull for him the second time around or just live without him in favour of more dedicated characters. J-Dog says, skip for me here. I have Aranea and I'm not really interested in Prompto. His C90 looks amazing though, so it would be a great time to pull for him. If I end up not getting Ace's BT, I might squeeze in some tickets, but I'll be spending a bulk of resources for the upcoming Vayne and Kate Sith. So, I think that, like, there are a lot of enticing banners coming up, but there's always a lot of enticing banners coming up. So that's something to bear in mind as well. If you're excited by Prompto, absolutely go in for him. He won't do you wrong. I think I probably am playing devil's advocate for saying that I like him like a lot, because I think a lot of other players probably don't, but I would like to at least give him the chance, because I think that he's better than a lot of people make him out to be. And then finally, Cobalt Zolk says, Prompto will definitely get something, gems or tickets depending on how nice Ace is to me. But I'm leaning gems. I've got something of a soft spot for the Chocobos, and I really like the way his kit is shaped up with all the new additions he's getting. He's got debuffs, auras, evasions, bit of healing, damage up. Oh, he's versatile. I've got Aranea built, and I actually still rate her pretty highly, with Vital Crusher still being really strong, Rebreak and Free Turn still being really good, Delayed still being really effective, but for your average player, she's probably not worth the investment unless you get her on the way to Prompto. I actually think this is pretty much, this is how I feel, although I probably, like, I don't think I would go gems on this banner. I think I'm happy to throw some tickets at it, and as somebody who already has Aranea as well, but I can see where you're coming from with that, and I do think that Aranea has served me very well. Like, she did very well for me in kind of like the Lightning BT Plus era, or BT era, sorry, where I didn't have Lightning BTs. She actually did me very well and continued to do so, and her Vital Crusher debuff is still very relevant to this day. Is she somebody you're going to pull out all the time? No, probably not, but she definitely doesn't want to go in the bin. And that's all for today's video. Thank you all very much for watching. Let me know in the comments below whether you're pulling for Prompto, as this is a banner that I think a lot of people would consider a skip. I am definitely not one that thinks it's mandatory, but I'd like to have him. Let me know in the comments below whether you're pulling for him. Although, as I've said previously, banners that people aren't pulling on are, to me, more interesting in a lot of ways than banners that people are pulling on, because I'd like to see what they're saving their resources for, or more specifically, what spaces they're using in the game's timeline in order to do that. So let me know in the comments below where you're saving and what banners in the future you're not considering pulling on. Thank you all very much for watching. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click that bell for notifications on any future videos I might be making, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you all. Bye.